Wake Up Barstool, the FS1 daily morning program that is being run by Dave Portnoy and all of his Barstool friends. Debuted today, this morning. Our Ben Axelrod wrote a great review for the site about it, but I want to get your initial takeaways. We both watched the show. It is definitely not a traditional show. It's pretty unpolished, and I think that's kind of what Fox is going for here. But it's early days. What's your early reaction?
I downloaded Fox One to watch this thing. I authenticated on their new app. It was a morning of firsts for me. I had it playing at the gym. I listened to all of it. I kind of had my eye on it. It's a podcast, so you almost don't even need to be watching. They have the highlights running at times and all that sort of stuff. The clip of the duck at Oregon's head coming off, and it's. If you watch sports TV, it's going to feel the most like the Pat McAfee show, but I don't even think it is, for one very specific reason, which is my skepticism about Wake Up Barstool from the moment that it was announced and the details rolled in throughout July and August, was they're starting something new here. Very different than McAfee bringing an amalgamation of a studio show that he had kind of just created on his own, got sponsorship for, and turned into a pretty polished machine on YouTube before it ever got to ESPN. This is people who happen to, yes, work for Barstool, but do not have built-in chemistry doing a show like this together, and don't seem to have a clear idea of what they want it to be because it is so different from a Barstool show. I think that's why you couldn't just simulcast something from Barstool, because it wouldn't have been sports enough, but you could feel, I think, that the Barstool inclinations bleeding into this show, and to me, that was some of the best stuff. So it's like, it's a fascinating thing to watch kind of play out in real time. I think it's better than what was on TV for them before on FS1, but I also think it's far from a finished product, and the push-pull of whose kind of editorial ideas win out here and what it becomes is going to be interesting to watch, and whether that actually makes for the best show or not.
Yeah, I largely agree with that, right? At times when, they were talking about sports directly, it kind of felt like, and I think I dropped this in our Slack earlier today, it felt as if this was like a show that is being produced by morning sports television producers and not Barstool producers, but it's being produced with Barstool personalities, right? Like,
And it is.
Like
Portnoy had a kind of a running gag about that. Like, he at one point had to apologize for yelling at one of the Fox guys who's in the building helping them put the show together. Not literally. I mean, he wasn't like he screamed at the kid, but like that tension was happening in the show.
Yeah, and that's like what is so strange about this, right? Like, you're getting into business with Barstool, and presumably the reason you want to get into business with Barstool is to, let them do their thing. Let them do Barstool on your network, right? Like, you don't want to take Barstool and make it something that it's not. And I think, and obviously we're couching all this with the context that, like, this is the first episode. They haven't had the opportunities to build chemistry, but it just felt really unpolished and awkward. And I agree, like, the best moments were the times where they were just kind of shooting the shit, not talking about like what happened in the game, and not trying to like kind of force these segments that kind of felt like, all right, you're taking, your standard get up format and trying to just have Dave Portnoy do that.
It felt like Portnoy almost is going to use like maybe his 4 appearances in September as an opportunity to show Fox that stuff isn't going to work on this show. Like, from the beginning, like it was this weird, his hosting of it, he literally opened the show by saying, this isn't going to be scripted and casual. He had no energy. He said, if you think I'm going to have energy, you haven't watched me before, or something like that, which I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because I just watched you on Saturday and all you could do was scream at all the fans at Ohio Stadium. So I don't even know exactly what that was, but it just felt like all of it was, okay, we'll play your game for a little bit, but this is going to be our show. And I agree. I mean, Jason Williams was an awkward fit to try to talk about college football, but when they let him talk about like goofing on refs at rec league games in his 40s or whatever age he is, that was kind of fun and funny and cool. And it kind of felt like it hit its stride. Brandon Walker teasing Portnoy about not being able to remember names or not actually watching any sports. Like that's the good stuff. That's what Barstool is. So how do you thread that needle where you're not just ignoring the news and the highlights, because you can't, but also bringing the best out of the people who you're hiring to do it?
Exactly. And it kind of gets to, what the goal is here for Fox, because, they're replacing, Craig Carton's show in the facility, and those shows weren't doing great numbers. They were averaging a lot of times under 100,000 viewers. So if Barstool is able to attract some of their stoolies to tune in, then it's already probably some level of success for Fox. But my question is, if you're already a Barstool fan, you probably have your, you know, two, three, four shows that you like and that you regularly listen to that are produced by Barstool. You're largely a digitally native, sports consumer. Are you going to FS1 to watch a new product that isn't quite like what you're used to at Barstool, that doesn't have the built-in chemistry that, a Pardon My Take would have? Um, and that's kind of just like a hodgepodge of personalities. You're getting different people there every day that don't necessarily work together. I'm not sure that this is actually something that the Stoolies are going to embrace, like people might think they would.
It's gonna sort of be this like, um, I guess a kind of highlight show of Barstool. Is that like the way to like it, it's almost like you I don't know what a good example. It's like when your NBA team ends up on primetime on Thursday night, where like you watch them all the time, and then here and there they get the national spotlight, and all of a sudden Charles Barkley's giving a take on them, or whatever. Like I think that that's kind of going to be how it feels, especially considering that each of the hosts is only going to pop up once per week. So I don't know if it can feel like a cohesive go-to destination of things. It and like you see the rolling scroll, which they kind of teased about with Kirk Minahan not being on the banner for the unnamed show promo, and like this. With all of that said, is such an obvious win for Barstool, but I don't know how it becomes one for Fox. I don't know
Well,
how they get what they want out of this outside of just kind of the proximity and the rub of an association with Barstool, which is great, but it's hard to quantify if that makes money. The same way we wonder, does the Pat McAfee show really make any more money for ESPN than the alternatives did? They can tell us young people, like more young people hit subscribe on their YouTube channel and stuff, and like that's well and good. It does matter in some kind of three steps removed way, but I'm not sure that it really gets the job done to make it like a profitable television show the way that ideally I would think they still want it to be, unless everybody just knows TV's going downhill, and it's just kind of looking toward the future, which might also be a possibility of what they want out of this.
yeah, I think you're right. Like I think a lot of this is just about the halo effect of being involved with Barstool, right? And honestly, it makes you surprised that this type of deal wasn't done earlier for Fox, considering there's probably a lot of overlap in the types of people they attract to their programming. Instead of let me put it this way, right? Like, I think Fox would honestly be happy with this deal if 100 people watched this show every morning instead of 100,000. Like, I think this is a play where you're going to get viral clips on social media. You're going to be in the Barstool business. Barstool personalities are going to talk about Fox Sports on their shows. There's going to be a lot of like cross promotion that way. And you're benefiting from getting that halo effect of, stoolies might, feel more favorably about you. I think you could judge just by honestly like how the press releases for this partnership were written. Like it was a lot of sizzle from Fox. They were really playing up this partnership. They really played up Portnoy's role on Big Noon Kickoff, which turned out to be quite a bit smaller than I think a lot of people would have expected based on reading that press release. I think Fox sees there's a lot of benefit to being in business with Barstool without necessarily having to, like actually do the Barstool thing.
And Portnoy sort of said it himself on air, right? He was like they asking what the streets were saying, so to speak, about the show as they were going through it, and he was like, "Well, no one was watching what was on air in this block before, so it can't be -0." I think was his quote, and he's right from like a buzz standpoint. He's also probably right from a financial standpoint. Like, it's not as if this is some kind of big financial risk that Fox is taking necessarily. I mean, we don't know any of the dollars and cents of it, but I'm just saying, big picture, they were throwing money into a fire pit with whatever they were doing before, including Skip Bayless, which his show cratered when Shannon Sharp left it. You might as well do something like this and have all those tertiary benefits come along with it versus trying to recreate Get Up 8.0 like you could do, So I get all that. One little thing I think would help, which it doesn't seem like we're going to get anytime soon. If they could just nail down one person to host this show close to 5 days a week, I think that would go a long way. I understand it can't be Portnoy, it can't be Big Cat. That's fine, but find somebody and put effort into developing them as the go-to face and voice, even if they're not the hottest take person, just to be the Molly Curum or the Mike Greenberg, if nothing else, because that felt the most strange just on day one. And going forward, when Portnoy's not there, I think that's going to be an even bigger issue for the show.
Yeah. I will say Brendan Walker really impressed me. I was not really familiar with him at all. I maybe have seen him come across my social media feeds a few times here and there. But he seemed to be genuinely knowledgeable about college football. Also was very comfortable, kind of razzing Portnoy a little bit, whereas the other two guys that were sitting on the end, you said Jason Williams, I'm not sure.
And Rico Bosco is the other guy. He's like a betting dude, and he's kind of like him and Portnoy, I guess, have some kind of, cat and mouse thing going on. I don't know.
I think Rico Bosco went like an hour without talking. So like there needs to be some sort of like balance there. But Brendan Walker can hold a conversation. I'm actually kind of interested in like his college football takes after watching him talk about what happened this weekend.
Yeah, mostly sports is my favorite Barstool thing that I've kind of like. We all kind of dip in and out of different stuff at Awful Announcing whenever a show goes viral or we need to look into something. And that one, him and Mark Titus, who will be on the show later in the week from what the press release indicated, I think that they're really good. I figured they would have a prominent role in this. And I think T-Bob Hebert is the other guy who will he's on like 3 days a week. It almost feels like they should just rip the Band-Aid sooner than later if he does well and just make him the 5 day a week guy, and just say he's the point person and go from there.
Yeah, someone's got to anchor it. I'll say one other thing before we close out the show, Brendan, and I think this is kind of maybe a bit of a carryover. I don't know if it's from the Fox producers or from kind of Fox's overall studio strategy in the mornings prior to this Barstool deal, but it struck me that it was kind of like a calmer vibe to it, than you would get on a Get Up or a First Take. And I think that is kind of intentional. It was pretty laid back. It felt like a podcast. And I think that's what Fox wants. And going in, not being, a super voracious watcher of Barstool content, I kind of expected it to be in your face and loud, and that's not what it was, and that for me was kind of an appealing aspect of it. I just
Do you
think
think
there.
that's what was Portnoy taking a shot at some of those shows when he said what he said at the beginning? Like, I'm not
I
going to
think
be in
so.
your
And
face.
and when you looked at like I watched The Facility a fair amount when it was on, at least during football season, and they kind of prided themselves on being very analytical and not kind of raising their voice like you would see over on ESPN. I'm wondering if that was kind of a directive that the Barstool guys got. Like,
Mm,
we want to be chill. We want to kind of attract the audience that's looking for something a little bit different than what you're going to get on ESPN. And does that fit the Barstool ethos? I'm not sure, because I kind of thought the more entertaining bits of the show this morning were when they're kind of going at each other, and when Brendan Walker was trashing Portnoy for him thinking that he can be a play caller in the NFL.
yeah.
But I think that'll be something to monitor at least.
You can see it in the branding, right? I mean, the intro theme song is like the kind of diner breakfast being cooked up, and then yeah, I mean, like there's also a difference between going at each other and kind of razzing each other versus you know the monologuing that can happen from a Skip Bayless or a Stephen A. Smith. Like, you can debate without it being a debate show, and I think that might kind of be the sweet spot where it feels like it's less about the take and more about the interpersonal kind of chemistry and whatnot. And there is a lane there. And hey, like you said, I mean, I think we're a pretty good barometer of this on our Twitter account. I would say we're already at a few million views on some of the clips from this morning's premiere. I'm not sure we had ever clipped anything from Barstool ever before this morning. So right there, it's showing the kind of conveyor belt of how this stuff can be delivered to people in a way that it wasn't before, and it should benefit both sides.
Yeah, we certainly weren't clipping Craig Carton or The Facility.